We are absolutely surrounded by it. Cans, airplanes, kitchen foil, aluminum is just everywhere. It feels so common, almost disposable. But what if I told you that this everyday material has a secret, precious past?
Okay, so first thing you gotta know is this. Aluminum is the single most abundant metal in the Earth's crust. It makes up more than 8% of the crust by weight. To put that in perspective, that's more common than iron, which is only about 5%.
And that right there, that is the central mystery we're diving into. If it's literally everywhere under our feet, why on earth was it once considered a precious metal, even more valuable than silver? And no, I'm not exaggerating. We've got the receipts on this one. According to the U.S. National Park Service, as late as 1884, aluminum was selling for $1.10 an ounce. That was the exact same market price as silver. It was, for all intents and purposes, a precious metal.
In fact, it was so precious that when engineers needed to cap the brand new Washington Monument, they chose aluminum. That little 6-pound pyramid at the very top was at the time the largest single piece of aluminum ever cast. And before they even put it up there, it was put on display at Tiffany & Company in New York like it was one of the crown jewels. So how is this even possible? Why was this super common metal so incredibly hard to get? Well, the answer isn't in its rarity, but in its chemistry. It all comes down to an unbelievably stubborn chemical bond.
Let's compare it to a metal we've used for thousands of years, iron. To get pure iron, you just heat its ore with carbon. The carbon basically just steals the oxygen away, leaving you with the metal. Pretty simple. But with aluminum ore, oh no. The bond between aluminum and oxygen is incredibly strong. Heat and carbon alone just aren't powerful enough to break them apart.
This meant scientists needed a whole new tool, a way to force a chemical reaction that just wouldn't happen on its own. That brute force method is called electrolysis, using a powerful electric current to literally rip those atoms apart.
But figuring that out took a long time. I mean, for most of the 19th century, some of the best scientific minds in the world tried and, well, mostly failed to isolate this elusive metal at any kind of scale.
You can just see how slowly this all went. In 1825, Hans Christian Ørsted manages to make a tiny, impure little sample. A couple years later, Friedrich Wöhler makes a fine powder. It wasn't until 1854 that Henri de Ville finally produced the first small bars of aluminum. Progress was just agonizingly slow.
De Ville's work even caught the eye of Emperor Napoleon III of France, and he got really excited, dreaming of creating ultra-lightweight armor and helmets for his cavalry. He even funded the research, but the process was still way too expensive for military hardware. So instead, the super wealthy had fancy aluminum cutlery and jewelry, while everybody else just read about this curious silvery white metal.
So the problem was kinda solved, but not solved well. The whole thing was stalled. And the final breakthrough? It wouldn't come from some famous European professor, but from two young men working continents apart who were about to have the exact same idea at the exact same time.
So for one of them, the scene was set in 1880 at Oberlin College in Ohio. A chemistry professor, Frank Jewett, laid down a challenge to his students. He said the person who could invent a cheap commercial process for making aluminum would be a benefactor to the world and would make a great fortune.
And sitting in that classroom was a student named Charles Hall. And as the story goes, after hearing his professor's challenge, he leaned over to a classmate and simply said, "I'll be that man."
And this is where the story just gets wild. At the same time, across the Atlantic, in France, another young man, Hall-Héroult, was obsessed with the same problem. They were both just 22 years old, but came from totally different backgrounds. Hall was a trained chemist, working methodically in his family's woodshed. Héroult was more of a tinker, inspired by an old book, just working away in his father's tannery. Different approaches, same goal.
And just look how close this was. On February 23, 1886, Hall produced his first little buttons of pure aluminum in his woodshed. Just 2 months later, on April 23rd, Héroult, completely unaware of Hall, filed his patent in France. When Hall went to file his own U.S. patent in July, he discovered Héroult had beaten him to the punch in Europe. It was an astonishing, almost perfect simultaneous invention.
Now, the patent disputes were eventually all sorted out, with Hall getting the rights in the US and Héroult in Europe. And their shared discovery, now called the Hall-Héroult process, didn't just improve aluminum production, it completely unleashed it upon the world.
Just look at this impact. In 1885, a pound of aluminum costs around what would be $100 today. By 1900,
After their process was industrialized, the price had plummeted to less than 50 cents a pound. It dropped by a factor of 200. It went from a precious metal to an industrial commodity almost overnight.
And here's the other part of what makes it a miracle metal. It's 100% recyclable. It can be melted down and reformed over and over again without losing its quality. Because of this, an estimated 75% of all the aluminum ever produced in history is still in use today in some form. That's incredible.
So why does this matter to you? Because that breakthrough in a woodshed and a tannery workshop is why we have modern airplanes, lightweight cars, soda cans, and countless building materials and pieces of cooking equipment. Their discovery literally built the modern world we live in today.
And in a final, strange twist, the parallels between the two inventors continued for the rest of their lives. Both became fabulously wealthy. Both were prolific inventors, constantly creating new things. And eerily, both men died in the same year, 1914, at the young age of 51.
It's an incredible story of how one stubborn chemical problem, once solved, can change everything. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What common, everyday object that we take for granted is just waiting to be completely transformed by the next young inventor, working away in a garage or a woodshed?